The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Thursday. God, we just flies by. Thursday, May 16th. We'll be talking today. We're going to be covering some news items. We'll start with the Supreme Court, and then taking questions, and then finally we'll talk about a Noah Smith article today about whether America is entering a new conservative era. That is, whether the country is turning conservative. So we'll talk about that. Let's just jump right in. So the Supreme Court is going to, over the next few weeks, be making decisions about the cases that they have heard over the last few months. And the number of those cases that are of particular interest that relate to the administrative state, the regulatory state, that are coming down the pipe. There was some hope that this court would start taking steps that would ultimately undermine the very nature and the very existence of the regulatory state, the administrative state. This is, as I think you all know, a very conservative court. 6 of the justices are conservative, and a few of them have expressed very, in my view, good views on the unconstitutionality of many of the regulatory agencies. But today we got a ruling that maybe brings some reality to how the Supreme Court is actually going to rule, and how far we really are from a Supreme Court that might actually advocate and stand up against the regulatory state and for our economic liberty, as we all know. I think this will affect the court. Economic liberty is not on the agenda for the right, is not on the agenda for the conservative movement. And so the court had a case regarding the CFPB, the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, which is a bureau set up under the Dodd-Frank bill that was passed after the financial crisis, the Great Recession. That was supposed to, of course, fix everything and cure everything and prevent all financial problems in the future. But anyway, CFPB was a brainchild of Elizabeth Warren, and was something that Elizabeth Warren, wrote about and advocated for, and really she was behind the inclusion. It is an agency, a government agency, like the other regulatory agency. It is an additional government regulatory agency, in addition to several other federal government regulatory agencies responsible for regulating finance, particularly the interaction between finance, banks, investment banks, insurance companies, really anything that has to do with finance, with consumers, that it is there supposedly to protect consumers from, how do we say this nicely, evil money lenders, from evil financiers. And Elizabeth Warren wanted to make sure that the CFPB was not captured by the industry, that is, that those evil financiers did not manage to have too much influence over the CFPB, and that the CFPB did not rely on the winds of political change in terms of its financing. So she was worried, as she should be, that maybe if a Republican became president, the Republican then would get Congress to pass a budget that restricted the financing, the amount of money the CFPB had. We know Republicans never actually get rid of anything. any regulatory agencies, but maybe they would reduce the amount of funding the agency has and therefore reduce its effectiveness from Warren's perspective, right? Effectiveness from her perspective. So what she got Congress to do, is create a mechanism by which the CFPB is not funded by Congress. That the CFPB gets its budget, its money, and that budget and money are approved by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a government entity, but whose operations and budget are not really controlled by Congress. It is a central bank. The chairman of the Federal Reserve reports to the government. He's appointed by the government, but he doesn't have a direct report. And again, the Federal Reserve does not have a budget determined by Congress. It has a budget determined by the Federal Reserve, whatever it deems necessary to do its job. And unsurprisingly, that means more and more and more and more and more and more and more spending constantly. Anyway, the CFPB is a real malicious, vicious regulatory agency, particularly when the Democrats are in power and they get to appoint the head of the CFPB. It is a place where it basically consolidates all the ignorant people in government who know nothing about finance and who are much more about let's call it social justice and leftist activism into one house, and then they go out and they try to obstruct what markets and what financiers and what bankers and other financial institutions are trying to do. It is a massive net drain on the U.S. economy. It is a massive destructive force in the U.S. economy. But there you have it. That's what it is. This case in front of the Supreme Court relates to the funding of the CFPB and the people suing are argued in front of the Supreme Court. This is after a Fifth Circuit Court decision that actually went against the CFPB and in favor of the entity that's suing. The argument is that the way in which the CFPB is funded is unconstitutional. That that Congress is responsible for budgets, Congress is responsible for allocating money, and that Congress, in a sense, has defaulted in its responsibility by giving this clearly government agency the ability to raise money from without the approval of government through the Federal Reserve. That is Congress has created this funding mechanism for the CFPB that makes the CFPB independent of Congress, and that is indeed unconstitutional given Congress's role in the Constitution in approving spending. Now, here's the thing. I am not a constitutional scholar. I do not know if that is a proper interpretation of the Constitution or not. I don't know. I'm suspicious of it for reasons I'll give you in a minute. But firsthand, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. I'm just not a scholar in terms of interpreting these kind of clauses and figuring these things out. All I know is that I am very opposed to the CFPB. And I have to say that pretty much anything that gets rid of the CFPB is okay with me. Indeed, I do believe legally that the CFPB and all the regulatory agencies, the FDA, the FCC, the FAA, are all abominations and are all violations of our Constitution. They are a way in which Congress has undermined its responsibility in terms of legislating and handed it over to the executive branch through these regulatory agencies. But it violates the separation of powers. It also violates our rights directly by the very fact that what they do is a violation of rights. But that requires a real understanding of rights. So I am happy, ecstatic, to see the CFPB demolished, because it is a regulatory agency like all of them, but this one is particularly pernicious, that violates our rights, that violates individual rights, and in that sense is anti-constitutional. Unfortunately, a large majority of the court today decided that I am wrong. By a 7-2 vote, the Supreme Court upheld the way in which CFPB raises its funding. The CFPB is not in danger of disappearing. This ruling could have wiped them out. What is particularly surprising, I guess, to some of us, it was to me, is who wrote the opinion. The opinion, but this is unbelievably consistent with my view of American politics. And it's unbelievably consistent with what I've been telling you about American politics, I don't know, for years now. Even though it's consistent with everything that I've said, it still surprised me. The opinion was written, the opinion defending the CFPB, the opinion that grants the CFPB that it can continue to function and its mode of funding is indeed sustainable and okay, was Judge Thomas. The most right-wing, we are told, of all the justices. But here's the thing about Thomas. I mean, two things about Thomas. One, I have a sense that Thomas's perspective, Clarence Thomas, that Clarence Thomas's perspective on what right-wing means has changed over the years. I really do believe that in the pre-Trump era, Clarence Thomas was a champion of economic liberty. I'd have to go research how he's voted on economic liberty issues going back. But that's the sense I had. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I'd really have to go study this. And then he was one of the staunchest advocates of individual rights as a principle. But I really do think he has changed. His wife, of course, was one of Trump's biggest supporters. She was reinforced many of the conspiracy theories, election denier, and a whole. I saw her give a talk in 2016 or 2017, which was just awful in its, maybe it was 16, in how just Trump brainless syndrome it really was. But but I wouldn't be surprised if this has affected him, not his wife, but just the general tendency on the right. There were actually three opinions written in support of the CFPB. Thomas wrote one. Two of the liberal judges wrote one, joined by two conservatives, Kavanaugh and Barrett. So Thomas's opinion stood alone, even though it was the main opinion. And then the third liberal judge wrote her own opinion. So it is kind of shocking, and we'll get to Thomas's reasoning. It is kind of shocking, in addition, that two conservative judges signed on to the opinion written by the more leftist judges. And I think the reason they did that is because Thomas's reasoning for rejecting, for supporting the CFPB is he claims a textualist support, right? So this is the other reason Thomas is problematic in terms of individual rights, to the extent that he wants to be and is going to be a textualist. He is finding this permission of Congress to establish whatever funding mechanisms it wants. He claims he finds it in the text of the Constitution, and he does a textual analysis, if you will, in his opinion. Again, I am not a textualist, and I don't know enough about the Constitution and the details of it to be able to agree with him, challenge him, or whatever. But CFPB is the Consumer Financial CFPB Protection Bureau. Protection Bureau. It is a regulatory agency set up by Elizabeth Warren to regulate financial institutions and their relationship with consumers. Evil, evil, evil organization. One of the worst, particularly when Democrats are in power. Anyway, let's see. On the plus side, I guess, Alito wrote a dissenting opinion. His dissenting opinion was also textualist. I suspect it wasn't very good. He was trying to show that, counter to Thomas, who was also a textualist, it's not in the text of the Constitution, and he had a narrow reading of the powers granted to Congress by the Constitution. And Gorsuch sided with him. I really would have liked to have seen an argument by Gorsuch. I now have come clearly to the view that at least on economic liberty issues, maybe on other issues as well, Gorsuch is the best justice. I tentatively thought maybe it was Thomas for a while, but Thomas, I think, has gone down a bad route. If there's any hope for undoing the regulatory state, it is Gorsuch. He has spent much of his career railing against the administrative state. I'm not surprised he voted against the CFPB here, even if he didn't write the opinion because maybe he didn't feel like he had a real strong basis in the Constitution unless he was going to challenge much broader regulatory powers that the government has. And so it's disappointing. I was, well, I mean, if you'd asked me, I would have said they would side with the CFPB. I was still hoping maybe Gorsuch could convince them. He couldn't. Conservatives have let us down once again, not standing up for true liberty and true freedom. And the regulatory state, the administrative state, will continue to chug along. Now, there are 2 or 3 other cases that are still yet to be decided by the court that relate to the powers of regulatory agencies. This ruling does not bode well for those, and there is a good chance that those will go against economic liberty as well. It is what it is. And by the way, this is the most conservative Supreme Court we've had in 100 years. And they will not be able to make a dent, I think, I suspect, I fear, not be able to make a dent in the regulatory state, not be able to make a dent in the attacks on economic liberty. So I don't know what the hope is, right? I don't know. Sometimes I get excited because there was a good, they had a good decision on the environmental EPA ruling. So when it's clear cut, the regulatory agency went beyond the letter of the law, then I think this court will do okay. But with regard to the very existence of the regulatory agencies, the very nature of the regulatory agencies, the level of power and authority Congress has in order to make decisions about these things, I don't think our courts, our country, our politicians are ready to have any of that challenged. And if you think about the fact that Supreme Courts don't change that often and that this is about as radical as it gets, and we're not heading for good times when it comes to economic liberty. There's not a single branch of government, including, it looks like, the Supreme Court, that is going to stand up for economic liberty. We are, those of us who believe in it, who believe it's crucial, it's really, really important. Those of us who believe that are in for disappointment, in trouble. All right. That is the Supreme Court. I think that's everything I had to say about it. Yeah, Kagan, Sotomayor, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. There's a combination you won't see often. All sided with Thomas, but wrote a separate opinion. We will see how long it takes the left for it to sink in that the opinion by Thomas is an opinion they agree with. I'm not sure how that's gonna kind of fit how that's gonna work. All right, talking about the right. In the Netherlands, we now have an agreement to form a new government. This is 6 months after the election, an election that gave Geert Wilders the top spot, in a sense that his political party won the most votes. Geert Wilders is described as a far right. But again, what do you mean by right? He is anti-immigration, populist, pro-welfare state, pro-government interventions, subsidies, other stuff, but maybe lower taxes, political party rights, populist kind of stuff. Very anti-Islam, very anti-immigration. Anyway, he won, and he tried to form a coalition government with other kind of parties that lean to the right, but he could not. And part of the sticking point was that nobody actually wants Geert Wilders to be prime minister. So a few months ago, he announced that he would not be prime minister, that he would continue negotiations, but that he personally would not serve as prime minister. And that was one of the terms of the negotiation. Anyway, they have now hooked together with the conservative liberal VVD, the centrist New Social Contract, know what that is, and the Farmers' Citizens Movement. We've talked about the farmers' protests in the Netherlands, BBB. And these four political parties will form the next government. We don't know exactly the minutia of the deal that has been struck, other than Wilders will not be prime minister. And we do know about what the plan is, for the next government. We know that they're going to have extraordinarily, here, we've got some here. They're going to abolish indefinite asylum permits. They're going to, asylum seekers who've been rejected will be deported as much as possible, including by use of force. They will, status holders, I guess temporary status holders, will no longer be given priority for the allocation of social housing. Automatic family reunification is going to be scrapped. That is the thing that is most likely to come about of this is their entire anti-immigration agenda and restricting immigration, not just asylum seekers, but generally restricting immigration as much as possible and doing what they can to get people out. That is to get them out of the Netherlands, immigrants, to get them out. Netherlands will also seek permission from the European Commission to opt out of the European asylum and migration policy. I think Hungary and Poland have opted out of those, and Netherlands would like to do the same. With regard to the farmers, the agreement will basically pull out all the stops to change European directives against farmers, directives that limit the size of their herds, that limit what they can use, that limit, what they can grow. So the Netherlands will become a major advocate for the farmers in Brussels. They want to eliminate all forced shrinkages of livestock. They do not want any forced expropriation, but they do think there need to be a generous voluntary buyout, so the government's going to buy farmers out, and a full commitment to innovation in architecture, in agriculture, whatever the hell that means. Other measures are going to include lowering taxes, building 100,000 new homes. I don't know if that's funded by the government or not. Making child care effectively free, supporting Social Security and other welfare programs, and basically, being all things to all people as much as they can, I guess, like most politicians. Let's see if there's anything else. This is good. They're going to commit to building 4 nuclear reactors, which they will start work on immediately. And they are committed to supporting Ukraine, and they've committed to meeting NATO requirements of spending at least 2% of GDP on their military. So some good things, some okay things, some awful things, a mishmash. It is going to be interesting. Geert will not be part of the government. He won't be prime minister, and he won't be a member of the government. He will lead, I guess, the coalition in government. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see and watch what they do and how well they do it and how far they go with their various programs and projects. All right. What else are we doing? Yes. All right. There's been a lot of talk about the backing for the demonstrations on campuses and the crazy left pro-Hamas demonstrations and where did that money come from? And we've talked about the fact that much of it came from leftist organizations, some of them funded by people like George Soros and other kind of Biden supporters, people on the left more broadly. The Free Press, Barry Weiss's publication, has a story today about, this was actually 2 days ago, about an American millionaire who is a Marxist, who is a huge funder of this pro-Palestinian, rage, as the Free Press puts it. Neville Roy Singham and his wife, Judy Evans, created an organization in 2017 called the People's Forum, which has been a co-organizer of at least 4 big protests after October 7th. One rally in Times Square, literally on October 8th, was a program that they co-sponsored. The People's Forum calls itself a movement, and I'm quoting from the article, a movement incubator for working class and marginalized communities to build unity across historic lines of division at home and abroad. They have donated over $20 million since 2017 through a series of shell organizations and donor-advised groups. This is who they fund. They fund, among other things, a lot of. What they fund is a bunch of leftist causes. The Singham's wealth comes from a startup, so from capitalism, from ThoroughWorks, which was a software consulting company that he launched in 1993 in Chicago. He sold it in 2017 for $785 million. It's a lot of money. A lot of money. Anyway, he is not like many of kind of the radicals of the past. They go into business, they make a lot of money, and they become soft capitalists or soft liberals or whatever you want to call it. No. Bingham has stayed a hardcore Marxist. He is a hardcore Marxist with deep pockets dedicated to the cause. He also is, maybe not unsurprisingly, a massive China sympathizer. He actually lives in Shanghai and has ties to multiple Chinese propaganda outlets. He is a proponent of this Chinese regime, what this Chinese regime is advocating for. He is a proponent of China more broadly, but he is probably more Marxist in that sense than even the Chinese themselves. The money, the organization that you kind of see in all these protests, the common tense, the common verbiage, the well-produced signs, and all of that, there's absolutely big money behind them. It's not big money in the sense of the Chinese government doing it. They don't need to. They've got Americans who are doing this. They've got a bunch of wealthy Americans who are real believers in the cause. They do this through a bunch of nonprofits, and they're just like the Tea Party was not completely just came out of nowhere. It was, and even when it did, it was ultimately organized and established through nonprofits funded by a bunch of right-wing, call them philanthropists. The left does the same thing. It funds a bunch of activist groups all over the country. It gives them a lot of money, and those activist groups then have students' chapters, and they help organize students, they help train students, and they get stuff done. And so yes, the demonstrations, the more you peel back, the more you find the different entities that are involved. What's interesting, I think, with these guys is their connection to China. And the extent to which the People's Forum, the nonprofit they created, it basically is almost verbatim reading off, advocating for Chinese propaganda, not necessarily on the Hamas-Israel issue, but more broadly on issues that they care about, that they are involved in. They are following the dictates of the Chinese Communist Party. So we still have Marxist businessmen in America who are willing to undermine America at every opportunity and fund the people who are actively trying to destroy this country. All right, let's see. We got some stickers. John, thank you for the sticker. Volta, thank you. Mark, thank you. Give me 5 seconds. Yeah, I need to get a remote control for my air conditioning so I can adjust it without leaving the room. All right, let's see. Okay, quick story about the latest case of deplatforming. In this case, we are talking about a evolutionary biologist by the name of Jerry Coyne, well-known, well-respected, pro-science. He has a website called Why Evolution is True. I guess he's got a new book out, which looks like interesting. Faith versus Fact. That sounds good. Why? Oh, this is good. I should get this book. You guys should get this book. We should support this guy. It's called Why Science and Religion Are Incompatible. That's good. By Jerry Coyne, Coyne. Anyway, I never heard of the guy, but he seems like a good guy. Seems like a guy who, believes in science. And he was actually going to be on a panel, kind of a debate, that was going to be about evolution. It was going to be indeed about the impact of science. The impact of science. The impact of politics on science. And in this regard, the impact on politicization of the study of evolution. I don't know what was going to be said in this debate. It would have been really interesting. I find the actual topic to be quite fascinating. It was going to be held at the University of Amsterdam, so in good Wilder's backyard. Anyway, he was going to, this is going to be in a panel with somebody called Dr. Boudry, who is a Belgian philosopher. They supposedly had collaborated, this Belgian philosopher and Jerry Coyne had collaborated on a paper about religion a few years ago. And this is the note he got, I guess, a few days before, regarding the discussion that they were going to have at the University of Amsterdam on specifically the impact of political issues on science. I'm sorry to inform you that unfortunately we have to cancel the event on Friday. I'm sorry it's so last minute, but in light of the information from Dr. Boudry, many of the members in the committee did not feel comfortable giving Dr. Coyne and Dr. Boudry a platform given their stance on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Another fear is how it would reflect on us as a committee and that we might be blackballed by UVA, AUC, whoever that is. We understand the irony of this, considering this is the very issue that Dr. Coyne wrote his article about. However, the group decided that we can't host this event given the current political climate. Again, I'm very sorry that we have to put so much time and effort into organizing this for nothing. I'm disappointed as well. Yeah, I really feel for this guy. He's really disappointed, really. So it turns out that Coyne and Boudry, I guess, right, are both I guess the Boudry is Martin Boudry, are both pro-Israel. They're both pro-Israel. And I guess it's now unacceptable in science, in a scientific conference, for somebody who's pro-Israel to discuss science, not the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, not the Middle East, science. They were going to discuss evolutionary biology and the way it's misconstrued by the public, the way people don't understand it and use it for political reasons. Right? And it's, tragic. Unbelievable that in the Netherlands, which has just voted pretty right, and I think this right-wing government will be pretty pro-Israel, that you can't get on a stage, you can't discuss whatever, any topic, I guess, if you are known in the world as being somehow pro-Israel. As Jerry Coyne says, our scheduled discussion had nothing to do with Israel, with either Israel or Palestine. That is, we were deplatformed, not for what we were supposed to talk about, but for views Martin Boudry and I independently expressed elsewhere. Views that were apparently offensive to the organizers that canceled the event. Pretty unbelievable, pretty amazing. Anyway, that is the world in which we live. Israel now, I guess, is nothing more toxic than being pro-Israel these days. I'm glad to be toxic. Your toxic representative, I guess. I represent you in my toxicity. And we will see when I travel in Europe in November. I've actually been invited. I don't think I've told you guys. I've been invited by the Cambridge Union, the oldest debating society, I think, in the world, maybe, or in England at least, to participate in a Cambridge Union debate. The topic of the debate is should the NHS be abolished or something like that? And they found some videos of me talking about the NHS. and they asked me if I would come and argue for the abolishment of the NHS, or the privatization, more correctly, of the NHS. This is a kind of I'm only going to have 10 minutes to speak. It's going to be 3-on-3, usually, these debates with student commentary. But super fun, super interesting, phenomenal exposure. Videos get huge numbers of hits, so even though it's going to be a short presentation, it will carry a lot of, it will be viewed by a lot of people. But I wonder what's going to happen there, because in spite of the fact that I'm there to talk about the NHS, I am known in the UK as both being Israeli in the past and being a strong defender of Israel. And I wonder whether this is going to be, this is going to be an opportunity for them to try to deplatform me at Cambridge. I don't know. We will see. We'll see what happens. Peter Thiel, by the way, was at Cambridge recently. Same union, Cambridge Union. Not at the debate. I think he was doing a talk or an interview. And he couldn't leave the building because it was surrounded by protesters because, he owns is an investor in Palantir. And Palantir, I guess, is military technology, and it whatever. Anyway, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun, but it's going to be interesting as I travel through Europe. To what extent am I giving talks on all kinds of topics is going to result in attempts, at least, to deplatform me because of my views on Israel. It'll be interesting. All right. I don't know if you guys saw this, but this is a story relating to Destiny. You guys know Destiny. Destiny, the YouTube influencer, the guy who did participate in a debate that Lex Friedman organized on Israel, and is being interviewed by Jordan Peterson, has been interviewed by everybody. I mean, he's a big. Destiny's huge. He has how many people follow him on Twitter? Actually less than I thought, but still a lot. 44,000 followers on Twitter. So I have, 15% of that. So pretty big. I think he's even bigger on YouTube. Anyway, Destiny has basically come out with a video saying he is cutting off all ties and all association with the progressive left. That he has in the past been associated with the progressive left, has taken progressive left stance, supported the progressive left, but he is moving to the center, I guess. I think he's been moving for quite a while, but he's now formally doing it and moving in that direction. He wants to make clear, according to his post, that he's not part of the conspiratorial nutty right. He is not joining the crazy right, as he called it. He's not. Let me just quote Destiny. Just to be crystal clear, my take has absolutely nothing to do with a group of anti-establishmentarians who believe vaccines are fake, climate change isn't real, the elections are rigged, and the mainstream media takes marching orders from the deep state. If anything, progressives have increasingly taken on positions similar to these, which is why I'm abandoning the label. If anything, they're becoming more similar to intellectual dark web types than anything else. So he's not moving to the right, but he is moving away from the radical left. This is a process, right, that Dave Rubin went through, and others, of course, have gone through. Many others have gone through. It'll be interesting to see where Destiny lands up. We know where Dave Rubin landed up, and we know where others have landed up. It'll be interesting to see where Destiny lands up. He at least at this point is resisting landing up all the way to the right, but we will see where he goes. But it's good to see the progressive kind of wacky left losing another one of its spokesmen or another one of its adherents, and certainly one with a big following. And also, it's good in the sense that I think that the progressive left, the crazy left, is really losing. it's really losing. We'll get to that in the second half of the show. All right, a few more quick stories. Vladimir Putin is visiting China today with really, his hands out. It really is interesting to see the power dynamic between these two, between Putin and Xi develop. There is a very little question of who has the upper hand here. Xi is clearly the dominant party. Xi's economy, Xi is a much bigger economy. Xi is a much more productive economy. It has resources that Russia just doesn't have. Certainly when it comes to technology, China is a relatively advanced country, certainly as compared to Russia. And it is really interesting. Now, partially, I think, as a response to Western weakness, and particularly Biden's weakness, you're seeing Xi cozy up to Putin, being welcoming to him, ready to work with him, and I think ultimately support his military campaigns, not explicitly by sending weapons, but implicitly by sending chips and sending many, many other of the tools that Putin needs in order to make his weapons, in order to sustain the whole thing. It does look like it's also meaningful that Xi has not visited Moscow. Putin now has been to Beijing, a couple of times just since the war started, maybe 3 times since the war started. So you remember Putin would, when people came to Moscow, would seat them at one of these big tables where they were way at the back and they were deemed as small. Xi is not going to go for that. Xi is the more powerful member here, and he knows it, and he is going to make sure Putin knows it, and he's going to make Putin come to him, not the other way around. So interesting to see the politics and the political dynamics going on there, and but scary, not good, very negative to see China and Russia getting closer. This is not good for the U.S. It's not good for freedom. It's not good for freedom anywhere. And it does not bode well. For the progress of freedom and liberty in the world, with these two heading up kind of a the what's now called the global South. Luckily, India and Argentina, at least, are not quite willing to play ball with these guys. Not completely. India is still trying to play both sides against the middle, Argentina has declared its alliance with the West. And one of the reasons, as I've said before, that I have a lot of respect for Milei and like Milei, and maybe a little bit more positive about Milei than many objectivists, is because of his foreign policy. I mean, if Milei had a foreign policy like Ron Paul, I would be very anti-Milei. But Milei's combination of his approach to economic policy and his approach to foreign policy suggests that he's much better, much more honest than a Ron Paul type. So, Anyway, Milei has resisted the temptation to join BRICS and has explicitly sided with the West, and explicitly, even more explicitly than some people would be willing to do on my chat, distanced himself from Russia and China, aligned himself with Ukraine and Israel and the United States of America. And for that, he gets a big thumbs up, and I think it's good for him. It's nice to see that there's still leaders out there who understand the difference between tyranny and liberty, because our leaders don't understand that. It's nice to see maybe the leader in Argentina understands it. All right, let's end with, I don't know, a little bit of good news. It's not big good news, but it is out there. Overdose deaths in the United States declined for the first time in like 6 years last year. So 2023 was the first year in which overdose deaths actually went down. They're still very high. Let's not get excited, but they are down from what they were. This is the first time in 5 years. This has become, of course, the whole issue of overdose deaths have become a major political issue. it's still true that most of those deaths are associated with fentanyl and other synthetic opioids, but fentanyl and other synthetic opioids saw a bigger decline. Maybe people have gotten a clue and maybe they're paying attention and they're avoiding them. So there's a bigger decline in deaths, overdose. Unfortunately, you saw an increase that not completely offset, but somewhat offset that increase of overdose deaths in cocaine and meth. And meth, let's just call it meth, so I don't have to pronounce the long word because I'm so awful at pronouncing things. In 3 states, overall overdose deaths actually did increase. The rest of the states, they decreased. Those 3 states were Oregon, Washington, and Alaska. It's good to see deaths from overdose going down. I think that the one way to guarantee them going down is to absolutely 100% unequivocally legalize them. Methamphetamines, yes, I can say methamphetamines, but it is a long word, and I am on occasion going to get stuck on it. So meth is just as communicative. The really depressing numbers of people dying of overdose that have been occurring over the last 5 years. Maybe that situation is getting better. There's no pattern yet. 1 year does not make a trend. We will see what happens in the years to come, but maybe people are getting wise to fentanyl and are being just more cautious in how they use it. It's not that fentanyl in and of itself is inherently evil or bad. Hospitals use it. People swear by it in terms of pain reduction. It's more effective than morphine or anything else. It's maybe within the recreational drug use community, they're getting a sense of how bad this is and to avoid it. Hard to tell. All right, that is the news. Another piece of good news, if you want, is that the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia has actually upheld Steve Bannon's 2022 contempt of Congress conviction, and that he will go to jail. That is, he will start a 4 months prison sentence. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy, a real enemy of the United States of America, a real enemy of everything this country stands for. Unfortunately, I think what this does is just martyrs him in the eyes of a certain type of American. But the Steve Bannon is a real destructive force in America. All right, let's shut that down. And I think we're good. All right, we will now move to the section of the program which is dedicated to answering your questions. Feel free to ask questions about anybody you want. I did whole programs of Steve Bannon years ago when he was the advisor to Trump. You can go back and find those. Just do Yaron Brook, Steve Bannon. I'm sure you'll find them. I don't think I did whole analysis of his talks back then. I don't think much has changed other than he's become worse than he used to be. But he's the equivalent of Dugin, what Dugin is to Putin, Bannon is to the new right, to the J.D. Vances and the Donald Trumps and the Josh Hawleys of the American right. Okay, reminder, there is a flash sale for Ocon running right now. So, you want to sign up for this. This is an amazing event. You will have a lot of fun. You will learn a lot. Overall, it's just hard to beat Ocon, both in terms of the sense of life, the camaraderie, the spirit, and the intellectual content that comes across. So yeah, come to Ocon. Flash sale going on right now. And you can access the flash sale by going to aynrand.org/start here. aynrand.org/start here. look at the top of the page. It'll give you, well, you can click on the link for Ocon, and then at the top of the page, it'll give you the flash sale. 20% off of Ocon. Please join us. A reminder that Alex Epstein is a sponsor of this show, and alexepstein.substack.com. And I think that's it. I think we're good. I will also say, if you're interested in my public speaking seminar, please sign up for it. You can sign up for it on yaronbrookshow.com/workshop, or just go to the website, and then there's a tab called workshop, and you can sign up. It's very limited capacity. There's only 7 people. Only 10 people. We've got a few registrations so far. I'm not sure. I'm not up to speed on how many. 3 or 4. But if you want an opportunity, it's the day after Ocon, 19th of June, close to the Ocon Hotel that is close to Anaheim. And it should be a fun day where you practice your public speaking and I give you comments on it. And hopefully you guys sign up for it. It'll be fun. Let's see. I wanted to remind you again. I'm not quite understanding why not more people are signing up for this, but there is a ad-free version of the podcast that you can listen to. Now you have to have a separate app. Maybe that's why people are resisting it. A speaker app, but you can go to my website again, Yaron Brook Show, yaronbrookshow.com, where you can sign up for this. You can press on Support Club, which is the tab on the website, and you can sign up. It's $10 a month, which is not a lot of money, to get rid of those obnoxious ads that the podcasting companies put into the podcast. And you can get a ad-free podcast experience. So not that hard. yaronbrookshow.com/support/club. Or just go to yaronbrookshow.com and go to the tab Support Club. All right. I guess people don't want to use it because it's a separate app and it costs money. I thought the pain of listening to the ads was greater than $10 and the need for a separate ad. But I guess I'm wrong. It happens. What else? Do we have anything else that we want to announce that we have going on? I did mention that I'm willing to do personal coaching. So if anybody's interested in that, just email me, yaron@yaronbrookshow.com. I notice a lot of people do ask YBS or something, ask Yaron or something like that. Just email me at yaron@yaronbrookshow.com. That will work. You don't need anything more complicated than that. You don't need anything in addition to that. Just use that. All right. I do have a $50 question. Somebody emailed it to me, so I have to find it. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's start with some question, $50 question, another $50 question from Michael. I want to go through life being honest and in harmony with reality. But people in today's world try and use any perceived weakness against you. So being completely honest about your thoughts, feelings, is actually not your rational self-interest. Okay, so let's break this apart. First, being honest is not a weakness. Being honest is not a weakness. Being honest is a superpower. It is a strength. It's a superpower. So don't start believing it's a weakness, because then you're buying into kind of a Christian view of morality. I have these burdensome duties. I have this morality that I have to do. I have no choice. It's my duty to do it. It's like a Kantian interpretation of objectivism. And you are then you see all the flaws, all the problems, all the difficulties, and it's like you've got to escape the view of morality as a set of duties, as a set of burdens, as a set of challenges, are a set of weaknesses that make you weak, because strong people lie, strong people deceive, strong people destroy the opposition. So there's still something in you, Michael, that has, I think, remnants of this kind of religious, dogmatic approach to ethics. You've got to get rid of that, because you'll never be able to fully integrate the objectivist ethics until that is completely out of your system, where you hold honesty as a strategy for success, as your method of achieving things, as a commitment to rationality, and what else can lead to success other than rationality, not as a weakness, as a super strength, as your superhero secret. But there's also something else that I think your question is kind of indicative of. Being completely honest about your thoughts and feelings. Well, what does that mean? What does completely honest versus honest mean? What does the completely add? And who are you supposed to be completely honest with regard to your thoughts and feelings? You don't owe people information above and beyond what is relevant to them in the particular circumstances. You don't owe people information that is not relevant. You don't owe people a download of everything that's going on in your life. You don't owe people a download of how you're feeling right now. Why are you telling them how you're feeling? Unless it's relevant to something. And then, yeah, why would you not be honest? Why is lying a better strategy than honesty if you want to not be taken advantage of? So, honesty does not mean you tell everybody everything there is to say. No, it means within a context, in terms of working with other people, interacting with other people, in the context, you let people know what they need to know. What is it, on need-to-know basis only? What they need to know, what's relevant for them to know. You don't lie about that, but you don't have to give them more information that's relevant. That's true of thoughts. That's certainly true of feelings. Your feelings generally are none of anybody's business, unless you want to make it their business. And if you're building a relationship with somebody where you want to make your feelings their business, then of course honesty is the only strategy you're going to be successful at. And if they take advantage of you, then it means you should have never had a relationship with them anyway. So, context, context, context. Now, when I say context, doesn't mean lie sometimes. Well, I mean, the appropriate times to lie, like when somebody wants to steal your watch and ask you where you hid it. But if somebody's trying to take a value from you, it's appropriate to lie. But context, context, context doesn't mean lie, lie, lie. It means think about what information is relevant for people to get from you right now at this junction, given what's going on, and do it non-dogmatically, doing it in the context of trying to achieve your goals, both in terms of your relationship with these other people and whatever existential goals you have out there. Oh, what am I doing? I can't find this question. All right. Everything else is working. Let me try again. Mail just kind of locked up on me. All right. Thank you, Michael. $50. Really, really appreciate it. And of course, all the other questions coming up at $10. That's a lot. That's a lot of support. I appreciate it, as always. Let's see. Enrique has a $50 question as well. We need a lot more of these. Still far away from our goals. Enrique, some leading objectivists look to focus primarily on integrating emotions to values. My understanding is emotions are secondary to purpose. Shouldn't the focus start from developing purpose out of values with the integration of emotions into that? Well, the thing is that you can, in order to choose your purpose, particularly your central purpose, your career, it is important to get connected with your emotions, to know what you like, if you will, what you enjoy, what makes you excited. Now, you can't do that out of context. So you have to make sure that whatever it is that makes you excited is also pro-life, pro-values, and integrated into your other values. So I view it as a constant spiraling effect. It doesn't go in one direction. You're constantly in life trying to integrate your values, your emotions to your values, your emotions and your values with your purpose. It's not like your values are fixed and your purpose just falls out of them. It requires real thought and it requires integration. And I think one of the integrations you have to bring in is your emotions. I don't think you put those aside. The better your emotions are integrated with your values, the more informative your emotions will be in terms of your purpose. But this is constant work. This is not something that you do and it just happens and you do it once and it all fits together and it's done. It's constant work because your emotions are complex things and you have to constantly, you're constantly emoting, you're constantly feeling, you constantly have to evaluate that. You have to evaluate your values, your context is changing, your knowledge is changing, and of course that can impact your purpose as well. So I don't view it quite as step 1, step 2, step 3. I think the most important thing you have to do, I think first, is integrate your values with your emotions, because to really be fully committed to a purpose, I think your values and your emotions have to be integrated. And only then, I think, can you fully commit to a purpose. Because the purpose is not to be found out there. Purpose is to be found within your values. And partially, it's which values make you particularly excited, if the rational values and if the excitement makes sense. All right. Robert says, meanwhile, your emotions have a job to do. Let them do it. Don't substitute feeling for thought, absolutely. But don't ignore nor repress your emotions. They are too valuable for that. Yes, I think absolutely. That's right. All right. Let's see. John. It's good to know that universities, police departments, etc., have deep pockets they can now sue for their funding for destructive protests on campus and elsewhere. Yeah, I mean, police budgets are going to increase. I don't know who they're suing exactly, and but they are deep pockets behind the demonstrators. Maybe they can access some of their wealth and get some of their money back. I don't know that that's actually happened. I don't know that that will happen, but yeah, there's no question. The demonstrators, behind the demonstrators, there are some significant deep pockets. No question at all. Thank you, John. Ayn Mirkat. Let me guess how he's going to end his question. I wonder if it has something to do with destroying Gaaza. Ayn Mirkat says, I've kind of started to accept that civilization is going to the dogs, that there isn't much I can do about it, and that I should enjoy whatever is left for however long it lasts. Is this justified? P.S. Gaaza must be destroyed. You're becoming way too predictable, Ayn Mirkat. You gotta change it up a little bit, the Gaaza thing. I mean, I certainly understand why you think civilization is going to the dogs. I don't know why the dogs are not the cats, but why it's going to the dogs. And certainly it feels that way. It seems that way. I want to remind you that it's felt that way over and over again for many decades now. It certainly felt that way in the 1970s and maybe even in the early 1980s. There was no lack of people in the Objectivist movement in the 70s and 80s, and even in the 90s, who thought the world was on the verge of collapse. It was any minute now, hyperinflation or whatever the collapse looked like. And it turns out the Western civilization is a lot more resilient than that. I suspect, although at some point Western civilization will go to dogs, why not now? I suspect there's still a lot of resiliency. I suspect this because I see the backlash against the nuttiness, both on the left and on the right. Because I see so much productive energy out there in parts of America, in Israel, and other places. I see it in the fact that to some extent the Israeli government is doing more than I would have expected and more than the United States wants it to. And it's basically giving the middle finger, at least to some extent, a little bit of it, to the American administration. I see it in the innovation, the AI, the biotech, the fact that people have not given up and just bought into the way life is, the status quo. There is definitely a growth in what Ayn Rand called the attitude of divine right of stagnation. I have a divine right to live the same way my grandparents lived. There's certainly a growing sentiment of that, but it's still not that large. There's a backlash against the left going on right now. No question in my mind. There's a significant backlash against the left, at least when it comes to social issues. You'll see that in Europe in the coming elections. You're seeing that in the United States, in a variety of different places. We'll talk about it in a little bit. Now, it's not going in a good direction. It's not like the backlash is for good, but it's certainly a rejection of the worst of the bad, and not sure where we'll land up at the end of the day. So I sympathize in the days where I really don't see how anything good can happen, but you have to think about it in the grand scale of history. You still live in the best of times. It's still true that it's never been better to be alive in most dimensions. And it's definitely true that that the world is getting, in some important ways, getting worse. In some other important ways, it's getting better. But intellectually, it's getting worse. But that there's resilience. The Enlightenment sparked a fire that is very difficult, a fire in man's soul, in man's spirit, which is now extended into Asia and extended into Africa, maybe somewhat, that is going to be very difficult to extinguish. Very difficult to extinguish. You see that even in the Ukrainians' desperate fight to hold back the dark age forces of Russia, right? So don't give up on that. On the other hand, there's nothing much you can do about it, no matter what the outcome is going to be. And you should definitely enjoy your life. Now, I don't think this should cause you to be a hedonist, short-term hedonist. I think you should still have 20, 40 years time horizons, and you should think in those terms, and you should plan in those terms, and you should continue to live, a good, productive life, a happy life. But yeah, focus less on politics, because there's nothing much you can do about it. Reality of it. Yeah. All right, Adam, is there a reason why small nuclear reactors is used in nuclear submarines and not being applied to power AI cloud data centers? Yes, there is absolutely a reason why it's not being done. The regulators won't approve it. Only reason. Regulators will not approve it. It's safe on a submarine. It's safe on an aircraft carrier. It's somehow not safe in the wilds of Montana or Wyoming or wherever they were going to build this thing. It's wacko, crazy environmentalists who think that, nuclear power is dangerous and going to kill us. But what they really is, they don't want energy. They don't want CO2 emissions to come down. They don't want solutions. They want CO2 emissions to come down, but they want CO2 emissions to come down because people are suffering, because people are not living as well because they want emissions to come down because industrialization is going away. They don't want you to continue living and being successful, right? And nuclear power would allow us to continue living and be successful without the need to shut down everything and live in a cave. They want you to live in a cave. Deep down, that's what they want. But basically, it's regulation. The regulations are not allowed. The particular nuclear reactors maybe are classified, but you could declassify them. You could build something similar, not exactly the same as them. The technology exists. The technology, there are multiple startups in Silicon Valley offering a variety of different technologies, one of them funded by Bill Gates, to create small nuclear power plants, and the government will not approve them. And utility companies will not back them because they're afraid of the government not approving them ultimately. So who wants to engage in risky activity when you've got regulators just hovering over you, and who have shown a complete disinclination to approve anything resembling nuclear power. Now, where are they advancing? They're advancing in China. China's building small nuclear power plants. And potentially India. Not in the United States. Not in Germany. We just heard that Geert Wilders said the Netherlands will build 4 nuclear power plants. I don't know if they're the big ones or the small ones, but they're embracing it. But the United States is not ready to, given its crazy environmentalists. Andrew says, I think as objectivists, we must accept that there's no way to bypass morality. Human flourishing can be a goal, but only against a moral standard. Even as marketing, it fails without society's larger commitment to selfishness. Yeah, but look, a commitment to human flourishing is a commitment to selfishness, if you understand what human flourishing is. Anybody who claims to be, for individual human flourishing does risk, the general term, does risk suggesting kind of a utilitarianism. But individual human flourishing is individuals pursuing their own happiness. It is individuals pursuing their own values. It is individuals using their own judgment. It is individuals being selfish. So you're right. We have to defend self-interest. We have to defend selfishness. It's the only way we get to human flourishing. Because if we try to bypass that, every time human flourishing contradicts the conventional altruism, people will side with altruism. That's just a reality. WCZN. Destiny is very funny. His emotional responses are much better than his considered ideas. His soul is American, but his explicit philosophy is pragmatic, deterministic, utilitarian. So he gets worse the more he thinks. That sounds about right. And by the way, since pragmatism is a uniquely American philosophy, in that sense, he's American too. Sadly. Sadly, pragmatism is the one philosophy that came out of America. All right. We are back to... we are back to... Michael, do people living under totalitarian systems evade constantly or shut their minds off and stop thinking to the point where evasion doesn't become necessary? God, I think most people just evade. They can't handle it. They would crumble if they faced the reality under which they live. So they engage in steady, constant evasion, right? And so, and now the dissidents, the ones with the courage are the ones who don't evade, the ones who are willing to stand up, the ones who are willing to fight. So they are they are the rare breed. But most people just can't handle what's happening to them. And they have to evade in order to survive. In order to survive emotionally, to fight physically, I think they have to evade it. Michael asks, was Frank Lloyd Wright an objectivist? How did Ayn Rand connect with him? No, Frank Lloyd Wright was not an objectivist by any means. He was, I think, the greatest architect who's ever lived, or at least in modern times. He was an amazing, his story, at least to some extent, parallels the story of Howard Rourke. He never got an architectural degree. He dropped out of school studying engineering, civil engineering, but he didn't complete a degree at all. He worked under a Cameron figure. He worked under Sullivan, who was the kind of the architect of skyscrapers in Chicago in the early part of the 20th century. He then went off on his own and fought the system and wouldn't compromise and went through long years where he had no commissions and no money and really, really struggled financially. But of course, that is the fate of most great creative geniuses. She connected with him. She tried to connect with him before writing The Fountainhead. She wanted to connect with him in order to learn about architecture and learn about him and wanted to connect with him, but he was non-responsive, as far as I can remember from the biography. He was non-responsive to her attempts to communicate before The Fountainhead. After she wrote The Fountainhead, she sent him a copy, and he loved it. And I think he saw himself in it, justifiably. I mean, not to the extent of a Howard Rourke. He wasn't a Howard Rourke. He didn't live up to that kind of moral standard. But as an architect, he certainly responded very positively to Rourke's character. And they exchanged letters, and ultimately, Rand went out, and I don't know which year this is. Ayn Rand went out to Taliesin West. Taliesin West was his home and school of architecture in Arizona, not far from Scottsdale. And, she spent a few days there. Again, I'm doing this from memory. I might have some of the details wrong. She and Frank Lloyd Wright's wife did not get along, from what I can remember. But imagine the meeting between Ayn Rand and Frank Lloyd Wright, two geniuses of the 20th century, two of the greatest achievers of the 20th century. It must have been quite something. And I think they still communicated a little bit afterwards, but then not so much. So they communicated for a while. They had a positive relationship. But I don't think, I think Ayn Rand and his wife didn't get something happen. I don't know. I don't remember the details. But she was in Taliesin West. And by the way, if you're ever in Arizona, or you might want to make a trip to Arizona, Taliesin West is extraordinary. It's beautiful. It's interesting. The architecture is interesting. The stories are interesting. It's definitely worth a visit. I mean, I love the desert, the Arizona desert. Scottsdale is a beautiful city. But Taliesin, it's very expensive to go to visit Taliesin West. I don't remember that. But anyway, it's definitely worth a visit. I think I've been there twice. Once I organized a group tour for Objectivists. There's also Taliesin East, which I think is in Wisconsin, which I've never been to. I'd like to go. But yeah, go to Taliesin West. So that's how they connected. All right, Richard, $100. Thank you, Richard. Richard says, loving the new format. I appreciate that. I'm still trying to... We're not getting as many views live as in the old format for either one, right? So we're like at 90. We used to get 121 up to 150 on the old format for both shows. So I don't know what the drop-off is from. Maybe it's the length. Maybe it's the time of day. Maybe I need to keep experimenting with formats until I get it right so that we maximize attendance in the live shows. I don't know, but thank you. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for the $100. That helps a lot to keep this going. All right. Let's see. Alexis says, until what age should one put their kids in a Montessori school before switching to mainstream, assuming one has a choice? Up to 6, it looks like a no-brainer, but can't find a lot of evidence afterwards. I mean, I kept my eldest son, I think it was up to 12, or close, maybe 10 or 12, something like that. So I think it was certainly, I think you can do it through 3rd grade. Now, let me say this. It depends on the Montessori school. You have to make sure you have a good Montessori school. But to the extent that the school is good and you think that they have adapted Montessori materials and adapted Montessori's methodology well for an older cohort, for older students, then yeah, I think 12, it works. Certainly 3rd grade, it works. So I think you have to delve in a little bit. What age is 3rd grade for European? God, 9, 10? Right, because that's right, in England they start school 1 year earlier. So 4th form, is that right? Something like that. So but you really have to go to the school, ask them, say, hey, Montessori didn't do stuff after 1st grade. Where are you getting this? How are you doing it? Just ask some questions, see how they respond. But yeah, given the alternatives are normal schools, which are below mediocre, I think Montessori is still good. Now, if you had a really, really good school that really, really did it right, post age 6, then maybe you switch. But given conventional education today, I would stay with Montessori pretty much as long as I could. So 12 maybe, 10, 12 easily. All right, Michael, have you seen Scott's latest video on how you're destroying the Objectivist movement? Why would I watch that? I mean, isn't it enough to have Scott be obnoxious here on the chat? I have to go watch a video of Scott. The last thing I want to do in life is listen to Scott blather. I understand it's like 2 hours long or something, somebody told me. I mean, it's Scott from the chat. I mean, I can imagine exactly the quality, the distortions, the misquotations, the perversions, the taking out of context, because I see it on the chat. I don't have to go to watch this video to know exactly the kind of thing. But I don't watch stuff people do about me. I'm really not interested, unless it's somebody I respect. And I don't respect Scott, so or his partner in crime, was a William, whatever. I don't respect either one of them. I really don't respect them. I'm not going to talk about it, but they've done horrible things in the background, or at least William has. So no interest in having any engagement with any content they produce. Michael, Jerry Seinfeld said at the Duke commencement speech, "We're living in a culture where we are embarrassed about things we should be proud of and proud of things we should be embarrassed about." Yes, and I highly recommend you listen to that commencement speech. I thought it was very, very good. I mean, I don't agree with everything he said, but I agreed with most of what he said, which is very rare, and he said it very funnily and eloquently and powerfully. And it was a beautiful speech. And I think this idea that we're living in a culture where we're embarrassed about the things we should be proud of and proud of the things we should be embarrassed about is absolutely right. And particularly if by culture you mean those young people in the audience. So, yeah, go listen to Jerry Seinfeld's commencement address at Duke University that was put online a few days ago. It really is inspiring and make you feel good about the world, and good stuff. Good stuff. Andrew, Rand made the point that the mystics of the right allow for freedom in the area that it deems unimportant. The material world, that's right. But that allowance is not an affirmative conviction of freedom. That's right. And that's why when it gets a little warm, when it gets a little hot, they're willing to throw it out and give it up completely, and why they've never rolled back the state. They've never rolled back the regulatory state. They've never rolled back the welfare state. They roll back taxes a little bit because the people who fund their campaigns want them to do that, but they've never actually rolled back our economic liberties because they don't really care, because they deem it at the end of the day as unimportant as compared to the spiritual world. They want to roll back your right to have an abortion. They want to roll back your right to decide who to marry. They want to roll back your right in terms of how to live your life, because they view those things as important. So there they want to control. But your economic stuff, it comes straight out of Luther and Calvin. Do it, who cares, it doesn't matter. But then if somebody says, yeah, but it does matter, and you can get more votes by regulating that part of human life as well, they'll go, oh, okay, yeah, we'll regulate that. We don't care, doesn't matter. One way or the other, it doesn't matter is the whole point. All right, Alexis. Former customer review. Yaron's public speaking seminar is fun, professional, and useful. Go and challenge yourself with one of the best teachers out there. Thank you, Alexis. Really appreciate that. Alexis participated in the seminar we did in Amsterdam. And look, I think for a lot of you, the public speaking seminar is not just about, teaching or giving a public talk about something. It could be how to give a better presentation at work, how to present your ideas better to your boss, how to just stand up in front of a group and speak. And it is one of those unbelievably important skill sets that I think people neglect until they need it, and then they don't have it. If you get so super nervous in front of crowds, if you get tongue-tied, if you don't know what to say and what not to say, if you don't know how to motivate your audience, come take the public speaking seminar. It'll help you guys a lot. And it's, again, the day after OCON in Southern California. You don't have to attend OCON to attend this. You can just attend this, or you can just stay over for another day in OCON. It's not far from the OCON hotel. I'll arrange transportation. And go to yaronbrookshow.com and click on the workshop tab and sign up. Love to see you there. Thank you, Alexis. Raphael, hi, Yaron. Could you name 3 persons, dead or alive, you would like to meet and why? Oh, that's so hard. God. Aristotle, Ayn Rand, and then it's hard after that, right? It would be fascinating to meet Newton. It would be, but I'd really probably prefer to meet Michelangelo. Could I have dinner with Michelangelo and Leonardo at the same time? Maybe Raphael will join us too. How about Steve Jobs, more modern times? Yeah, those are the people. I've been lucky enough to spend time with great people, right? Leonard Peikoff, spent a lot of time with Leonard Peikoff. Don Valentine, the guy who funded Steve Jobs, many other, John Allison, many of the real incredibly successful business leaders in the world today, I've had an opportunity to spend time with. So a lot of particularly in finance, a lot of the hedge fund guys, the big names in the hedge fund world, not all of them, but I've had a lot of, but I would say Ayn Rand and Aristotle at the top, and then there's a lot of people that I would put next. Why them? Because they are the greatest geniuses in history. They shaped Western civilization. I mean, Aristotle shaped Western civilization. Ayn Rand will shape Western civilization, and that would be fascinating to meet them. Yeah, I'm sure I could come up with more names if you gave me more time. Thanks, Raphael. Really appreciate the support, guys. It was great. All right, let's see. What do we want to do now? I want to remind you of, I don't want that window. I'm picking my windows here. Yeah, I want that window. I want to remind you that you can get a ad-free version of the podcast by going to yaronbrookshow.com and clicking oh God, what was it? Clicking on Support Club. Support Club is one of the tabs, and that will allow you to sign up for $10 a month and then never have to listen to ads again during my podcast. So hopefully that is something you find appealing and interesting. Go do that. I'll also mention that you should all come to OCON. Let me say this. We're going to be, Tal Svani and I are going to be making an announcement at OCON that is going to make those of you who are objectivists, I think, very excited. I think super enthusiastic, excited about the future, inspired. It's a big one. It's a big one. And just while we were doing the show, I got a text from Tal that basically says, yeah, it's a go. We're doing this. And I'm excited. I'm really excited to be a part of this. It's an idea I've had for 20 years, and it's going to happen. And you'll find out if you come to OCON, and you will be inspired by this, and it will be great, really presented and fun and everything else. All right, let's see. Yes, let's go to our topic. So come to OCON. There's a flash sale right now. AynRand.org/start here. 20% off OCON. I think today's the last day, maybe tomorrow, but today may be the last day. So before midnight today, sign up for OCON. It's going to be amazing, fantastic, the best. I'm doing my best imitation of Donald Trump I can. That's about it, though. All right. So I came across an article by Noah Smith. Noah Smith is a left-of-center economist or economic blogger. I don't even know if he's how much of his formal training is economics. I assume it is. I assume he's got formal training in economics. But he's an economics blogger. He's one of two center-left economic bloggers that I read. They have Substacks. Him and Iglesias, Matt Iglesias, are the two that I read because I find them interesting, and they are leftist up to a point. And when it comes to a lot of issues regarding economics, they're actually quite good. Not all issues, some issues, but they at least are thoughtful, and they present arguments that we, those of us who are on the pro-free market side, need to be able to address. Anyway, he had an article today. He titled it, and I thought I'd do the show on this, 7 Reasons America is Headed for a More Conservative Decade. So I thought this would make your day. This would please you guys. You'd get excited. You'd get motivated for the future. Because America is going to become a more conservative place. Anyway, why does he think this? And part of this is just analyzing voter patterns and so on. Let's go through the 7 and see whether we agree and what this really means in terms of the country. What kind of conservatism are we talking about? Where is this? And one of the things that Noah Smith says is, look, right now, the way Noah Smith sees conservatism, there is no conservative political party. There is nobody on the right who represents conservatism. He recognizes, to his credit, that Trump is not that. Whatever Trump is, he's not conservative. He's something. So when he says drift towards conservatism, he's not talking about drift towards Trumpism. He's talking about drifting towards kind of an old line, maybe even Reagan-like conservatism. So why does he think that's where we're heading? Well, first he says, just from an electoral perspective, so a voting perspective, the reality is that minorities, non-whites in America are now clearly drifting to, call it the right, away from the Democratic Party towards the Republican Party. And this is happening, significantly among blacks and among Latinos. And I will suspect that it's happening among Jews right now, although there's no polling yet to suggest that. There's no polling about it yet, but I think many people are suggesting it. If you look at graphs of how Democratic Party, polls with blacks, in the 2000s, basically well over 80%, close to, maybe in the mid-2000s, 2005, maybe in the Bush election, close to 90%. Since then, it's been declining slowly. It went under 80% funnily enough, in the Obama years. And it is gone, it looks like it's going sharply under 80% today. Not quite, it's not nowhere near 50%, nowhere near. It's still up there in the 70+%. But it's a big difference, and it can make a big difference in swing states like Georgia. If you get fewer blacks voting Democratic, the Republican will win Georgia. Many of them are becoming Republicans. And you can see, like, right now, just over 20% of blacks claim to be affiliated with, identify as Republicans. That we've never seen that before, certainly not in the modern post-civil rights era have we seen so many blacks support the Republican Party. And the trajectory is upwards. The trajectory is that number increasing. With Latinos have always been more split, at least since 2000 or since the 1980s, they've been more split. They've been bouncing around, but just about 50%. But it really does look like it's now under 50% of Latinos support the Democratic Party. That doesn't mean more Latinos support Republicans. That's not the case. There's still a bunch of independents in there. But the Republican Party affiliation with Latinos is up, and it's approaching 40%. Now, what is interesting here is a number of things. One is the fear, the panic almost, that many people have regarding the idea that immigrants will come here and vote Democratic and therefore permanently tilt the country towards the Democrats is just, it is not true. It is not right. Right now, for example, if you believe the polls right now, the Republican Senate candidate is winning in Nevada by a big margin. The only way that can happen is if he is gaining a majority of the Latino vote in Nevada. The Latino vote is, I think, has always been inclined towards conservatism, not towards free markets, but certainly towards the social agenda of conservatives, certainly towards religion, firstly towards the emphasis on family. The Latino vote has always been there. It's Republicans who have done everything in their power to alienate the Latinos to alienate them, to distance them, to shun them, and to antagonize them, particularly in California, which has led to the Latino vote being so dominantly Democratic. But that is shifting. That is shifting with second, third generation Latinos, and it's shifting because their conservative nature is coming to the forefront. It is shifting because the ridiculous nature of the Democratic Party is becoming evident. It's shifting because the Democratic Party wants to call them Latinx, and they don't understand why, and they don't understand what the hell that means, and they reject this new terminology as absurd. They feel like the Democratic Party speaks down to them. And they, to the extent that Latinos tend to be more working class, the Democratic Party has moved away from the working class. Trump has rallied the working class to his, and they are much more likely to vote for, I think, Trump. So, Hispanic voters keep shifting to Trump. They shifted a little bit in 2020. It looks like they're shifting even more now. And that will change the dynamics of who votes. Noah Smith shows this interesting chart. He shows non-white conservatives, people who self-identified as conservative, right? Asian, Latinos, and blacks, but identified as conservative in their family and in the way they viewed the world, right? Most of them identify as Democrats, or used to identify as Democrats, right? And yet, today, they are shifting away from the Democratic Party and shifting towards the Republican Party. And a significant number of Latinos, blacks, Asians consider themselves conservative. And they don't want to have anything to do with the Democratic Party. And the more wacky the Democratic Party becomes, the less they want to be associated with it. So it does appear like there is momentum for the Republican Party to capture minority votes and to dominate the political landscape in the years to come. Ronald Reagan, way back in the 1980s, predicted. He predicted that the children and grandchildren of immigrants would shift to becoming more conservative over time. Right? So, yeah, I mean, they mean by conservative, again, the social values, family, anti-gay, anti-trans, and I think even to some extent physically conservative in the shallowest sense, but also pro-religion. Latinos are anti-abortion. I think you probably get more anti-abortion among the Latinos than you do certainly among white women. But that I'm not sure. But certainly they come to this country. Many of them are Catholic. So reason number one, a shift in minority voting. Reason number two, a real broad, what seems like a real broad dissatisfaction with DEI. Not just superficially, but I think this is real. And it's true that it might be that universities are just playing games. Now they're calling it IED instead of DEI. But for most Americans, it's not a game. Most Americans don't want this. And by the way, I include here these minorities who don't want special privilege, who don't want to be admitted to university not knowing whether they were admitted because they qualified or whether they were admitted because of the color of their skin. There is a real backlash across the board against DEI. And by the way, this is certainly in the courts. We saw with the Supreme Court, and that's going to hold in that sense. The courts are becoming a conservative. The Federalist Society has done a good job in packing the courts with these kind of judges. DEI is being, toned down. Budgets are being cut. In some cases, scrapped completely. We talked about the fact that MIT no longer requires a mandatory DEI statement for faculty hires. There's a return to standardized testing. A number of elite universities that scrapped standardized testing a few years ago are now announcing that they are reinstating standardized testing, SATs, MCATs, and others. There is a greater emphasis on talent, skill, ability, and a move away from the absurdities and the over-the-top nature of DEI. Businesses like Google are sending memos to employees about the need to run a business as a business, the need to make money, the need to be profitable, the need to be a business. The same is happening with other types of businesses. So there is a real, DEI has hurt the left, and there's a real shift in America away from DEI. There is a real, and we've talked about this on the show many times, the government just can't keep on spending the way it's spending. It just is impossible to happen. And it's impossible to happen. There is a limit to how much you can spend. There's a limit to how much debt you can take on, in spite of the claims of the MMTs and others in the world. And this just cannot go on forever without a major recession, a borderline depression, or inflation. And something has to give. And, so some kind of conservative, balanced budget type talk is going to, not yet, at some point, because Trump certainly is not going to do this, at some point it's going to have to resonate, because otherwise we're screwed. And maybe when we're screwed, that'll resonate. I'm not sure what comes first, right? So whether that means taxes are going to go up, or whether it means some spending cuts and even, right? Even reform to Social Security and Medicare is going to happen. So, it's only fools, idiots, who try to predict a date for when this happens. But the trend is clear. You cannot keep accumulating debt the way this country is accumulating. And only a fool would try to say, well, 200% of GDP, that's when it collapses. Luckily for you, I'm not a fool. Well, maybe that's why you're here. But it's no question it's going to happen. So the left doesn't have a solution to that. The left has nothing they can cut. They cannot cut defense. They cannot cut their beloved entitlement programs. They can raise taxes, but they can't solve this problem by raising taxes alone. And they will lose elections if they raise taxes, and that's all they do. So the political map will swing to the right, will swing towards somebody who's willing to at least cap spending in one way or another. What else? The American people hate the idea of defund the police. I mean, it didn't last very long. 1 year, violent crime spiked, and everywhere saw a massive increase in police spending. Indeed, it's the one thing that Americans across the board agree with. Spend more on police. This is an issue that the far left has lost completely, lost thoroughly, even in a place like Minneapolis, where Rodney King actually died and where the protests started and everything, and where they defunded the police, they completely refunded it and upped it. So violent crime is coming down. And violent crime is coming down because we have more police on the streets. Violent crime is coming down because we have increased the number of police dramatically. Indeed, right now, the number of police in the United States is at an all-time high. There are more policemen out on the streets today than at any point in American history. And that has had results, as you'd expect it to have. Violent crime is down. Daniel, yes, I still owe you guys 2 movies, one of them Scent of the Woman. I know. I know. I'm way behind on the music, the movies, all of that stuff. Way, way behind. Short story. We will get to it. I promise. I promise I will do it. I'm not promising when, because I keep failing on that promise, but I will do it. It's like the debt. There will be a debt crisis. Can't tell you when, but there will be one. The same with the movies. I will cover them. I have it. I have the list. I have it all down. I just don't know when. Anyway, yeah. If the left's associated with high levels of violent crime, if the left is associated with defund the police, the left cannot win. And I think the right is doing a good job associating with them. And it's why this shift is not just a temporary shift. We have a shift towards more policing. We've seen that more policing works. Immigration. Basically, Americans don't like the immigration system that we have. And there is no compromise immigration system that allows for more immigration that can pass the Senate and the House. And the only thing that can be done is, some kind of limiting immigration, which I think you can get probably bipartisan agreement to do, because politically it's not tenable for the Democrats not to do so. As long as the immigration problem persists, Democrats lose, at least the presidency or those who perceived who can do something about it. The reality is that this asylum system is insane. It's crazy. Americans know it's insane and crazy. And they will vote against people who are trying to maintain it. And they're going to vote against Biden to a large extent because of immigration. And there's no question, this is the #1 issue in polls that Americans are upset about. And they will vote basically on this. Now, there's not a lot that can be done without passing a law and without, for example, the United States getting out of an agreement they signed in 1965, an international agreement for asylum seekers. But fine, get out of it, right? Get out of it. It would be nice if they got out of the stupid asylum system and embraced fully the come here to work system, which would allow millions and millions and millions of immigrants into the country. That would be fantastic. But that's not where they're going. Politically, that's obviously not tenable, and it's not going to happen. I don't think these changes, by the way, are all necessarily good. It's just this is the reality. The fact that Americans are upset about immigration, in my view, is unbelievably irrational, but it is what it is. And I agree with Americans that immigration based on asylum as the sole criteria or as the dominant criteria is insane. It's ridiculous. And it's anti-American interest. We should stop. We should put asylum seekers at 0. And we should put job seekers at however many want to come. All right. So he gives 2 others. One is We have a conservative Supreme Court. We're going to have a conservative Supreme Court for a long time. And that matters. It has a huge impact, both on behavior, but also just on attitude, on the culture, on what is considered acceptable or not. Right? And finally, there's no question, these Palestinian protests did not do well for, protests did not do well for the left. While Americans are not necessarily pro-Israel, they're certainly not pro-Hamas, and they're certainly not pro-students occupying buildings, students rampaging through the streets, students blocking, or demonstrators blocking streets. They don't like these people, and the fact that the protests are wrapped up the Palestinian cause with climate change, with racial justice, with abortion rights, with gender equality, with trans rights, with affordable housing, with anything. It's just one big glob of stuff. It's just made them more obnoxious and less sympathetic. So basically the left has created a vacuum. You don't have a conservative movement to fill in that vacuum, because there's no conservative movement today. What you have filling the vacuum is populism. And the question is whether this kind of Trumpist populism can sustain itself beyond Trump. How much of this is tied to Trump, and how much of this is tied to just a general disregard for America and for any kind of ideas, principles, any kind of ideas and principles. That's hard to tell. Whether we see a conservative movement rising up is really hard to tell. Christianity, supposedly, we're told, is in the decline, so it's not clear that religion is would be a unifying factor for a new conservative movement. I think the decline of Christianity is overstated, and I think those trends will reverse themselves. We will see. That, again, that's a kind of a long-term, trendy kind of thing that's hard to really estimate, but there's no question that since 2007, since the mid-2000s, religion, people who consider themselves religious, Christian, that is on a downtrend, a dramatic downtrend. And whether that reverses or not, I think to a large extent will determine the nature of authoritarianism in America's future. I think better to say that conservatism is on the rise. I think that's a mistake that Noah is making. I think the right thing to say is that the package that constitutes the left today is in decline. The woke, DEI, identitarianism, defund the police, burn down businesses, occupy campuses, and generally the nihilistic view, that is in decline. And what to replace it could be anything. Certainly it appears now that what's replacing it is Trump-style populism. All right, if you want to ask questions, we've got lots of time, so you can ask questions. We're way under our goal, so again, lots of time to answer questions. So feel free to jump in with questions about anything out there. And yeah, I mean, we've got some nativists on the chat. You know, they've got questions for me. You know, $5, ask the question. Isn't it amazing that the people who seem to, you know, use up the most real estate on the chat are the people and who are most obnoxious and who look down on everybody else on the chat and on me as well, are the ones who are not willing to put up a few bucks to ask a question, right? Because they're above that. their questions should be answered in spite of the fact that they don't put up money, because they are better than you guys. Better than you guys. You should block those people. You should just block them from your own chat. Let them talk to themselves. I think that is a very useful thing. Oh, Rafael said he's already blocked them. Good, Rafael. Good for you. Mary Aline, thank you. Really appreciate the sticker. That's great. By the way, if everybody right now did a sticker, we would definitely get to our goal. But, just if a few people did a sticker, we could get closer to our goal. All right, tomorrow, same time, same place. And tomorrow's show will be, the last portion of it will be positive. So as I promised, Fridays are days of positivity. So I'll come, we'll do something tomorrow, maybe on another one of the virtues. I think people really enjoyed the honesty one we did last time. So something basically on that kind of theme, on taking some of Ayn Rand's virtues, the morality, objectivist morality, and chewing on them a little bit. People wouldn't block you if you had something useful to say. You're not being critical. You're just being obnoxious. There's no content to your chat posts. I mean, literally zero content. And there's a lot of questions. And again, the forum and the basis to ask questions is the super chat, not the chat. All right, I'm seeing a lot of stickers coming in. You guys are great. Thank you. Does infinity exist, Alexis asks, for $50? No, infinity doesn't have first of all, it doesn't have an existence, right? But there is no infinity. Now, things can go on forever. Things can go on, and things don't have a beginning without there being infinity. Now, Alexis, it is a question ultimately beyond my pay scale. It's a good question for philosophy of science. We'll have one on Monday. Monday, we'll have Keith. Keith Lockett will be on, so please join us for that. This is a great question to ask Keith about whether infinity exists or not, and what does it mean to say that it exists or not. But I think Ayn Rand talks about this in the introduction to Objectivist epistemology, and I think our answer to it is no. That to be something, the thing has to be finite. It has to be finite. It has to, and therefore, it doesn't have to have a boundary, but it has to be finite, and therefore the universe is finite. Everything is finite, and time exists within a finite universe. So I think infinite is a useful term in mathematics, a very useful term in mathematics, and probably a useful term in science. But does it exist as an independent thing? I think the answer is probably not. All right, let's see. Lots of, thank you, Alexis. Really appreciate the support. Lots of stickers. Mary Aline, thank you. Robert, thank you. John, thank you. Zach, thank you. Nalufar, thank you. Rahman, so Rahman is easy. Nalufar is not easy. Donna, thank you. And then we've got a few questions. But yeah, keep the stickers coming. We'll, enough stickers and we'll make our numbers. Kirk says, did you see Harrison Butker's recent commencement speech? He said some pretty revealing things, really leans into Catholicism, and is getting applauded by conservatives after getting criticism from the left. No, and I don't know who Harrison Butker is, but I am going to copy paste this, and I'll try to find it and watch it. It is going to be interesting to see if this trend away from religion continues. I would not be at all surprised. Whoops, what happened? All right, there we go. I wouldn't be at all surprised if if it doesn't, if it reverses itself and religion starts increasing, just the way Leonard Peacock predicts in the dim hypothesis. Robert, positivity for the win. Ayn Rand gives compelling answers to what's wrong with the world. But more important, she supports values and life on earth. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's really what it's all about. What it really is all about is living with a capital L, living to the best of your ability, living, and pursuing your values and making the most of your life and embracing and life and challenging yourself and taking risks and enjoying the process. Enjoying the process. Apollo, what did I do? What was the title of your house tour show or a link you're on? A person in the chat and myself are interested in your artworks. I don't remember. I think if you Google Yaron Brook condo, maybe, you can find it. Where I do a little video, where I show a little video of the house, of some of the house. So I think, not this weekend, not next weekend, the weekend after that, so 2 weeks from now, I will do a members-only show on female nude sculpture. I think. I might expand it to female nudes, but I think I'm going to do a members-only show on female nude sculpture. I'll show you some sculptures from across time, going back to the Greeks. The Greeks didn't particularly like the female nude, and they adopted female nude relatively late in sculpture, I think reflecting the view of women. And then just a little bit about the history of that, and then the female nude in the Renaissance, and then kind of I think the height, the peak of the female nude is probably the 19th century. We'll look at Canova from the late 18th century, and then we'll look at some of my favorites from the 19th century. So we'll do a show on sculpture. Many of those sculptures I have photographs in my house framed, hanging on the wall. So anyway, if that's something of interest to you and you'd like to see it, then you can by becoming a member here on YouTube. So this is only for YouTube members. Unfortunately, I can't export your membership from other platforms to YouTube. There is this feature of gifting membership. I can gift membership, but the reality is I can't decide who gets the gifts, which is a little weird. The gifting is, YouTube does it automatically, which kind of sucks. So you can become a member for actually $5. I changed, there's one level of membership that's only $5. So any level of membership for $5, you can get access to the members only shows. And I'll be doing the next one in I think it's 3 weeks from today. 3 weeks from this weekend. Because this weekend and next weekend I have to prepare for my Peterson Academy talk class that I'm teaching. We'll go from there. Raphael, if the universe is finite, what happens if an entity reaches the finite point, and what's outside the finite space? Nothingness? There's nothing outside the finite point. That is, I think our conception of space is wrong. There is nothing outside the universe. The universe is everything that there is. So there can't be anything outside the universe. And I don't know that you can apply the concept of outside to the universe. You can't. But I don't know if you can reach the finite point of the universe. Maybe it's all one big, we're trying to draw this in three-dimensional space, and I don't think you can. Maybe when you reach what you think is the finite point, you're back to the beginning. But I don't know. I mean, this is way, as I've said, this is way beyond my pay grade. And why do you care? I do think that's important. And you should think about it. Why do you care? In what way is this relevant to your life? I mean, we all want to try to understand physics. Like, I came to the conclusion 40 years ago that I will never understand Einstein's theory of relativity, and that I will never understand quantum mechanics. I can do the math. I can do the math for both of them. I can solve the problems. I can get an A in an exam on quantum mechanics. But I don't understand it. And I don't understand relativity. And I think very, very few people in the world do. And I came to the conclusion that it doesn't matter. I don't need to understand them. It doesn't change anything about my life one iota. It doesn't solve any philosophical puzzle. It doesn't gain me anything with regard to morality. It doesn't make me think worse of myself or better of myself. I have a certain intellectual ability vis-a-vis physics. I've reached its limit. Okay, great. Within that limit, there's a lot to do. So none of these questions really bother me, that I don't have an answer, a complete answer to them, because it doesn't matter. So I don't know, nobody knows, and this is the thing, nobody has an answer to the shape of the universe. There's a sense in which there is no meaning to the question. And particularly, given how little physics we know, all we can say is, can't violate the law of identity, can't violate the law of causality. A is A, things are what they are. But what are they? I don't know. We don't know what gravity is, let alone what the shape of the universe is, to the extent that you can even talk about it. Mary Aline, this is the last question. You can do stickers. I like stickers. Stickers to support the show, value for value. Some people seem to have vehement opinions on everything without having sufficient knowledge to back them up. Would you comment? What's so hard about saying I don't know? I don't know what's so hard about it. But it's absolutely true, and the physics example is a good example. I'm not accusing Raphael of this at all, but I know people who, they will give you a whole lecture about quantum mechanics, and you ask them, well, what have they studied? What have they done in quantum mechanics? They don't. They've read a couple of popular books about quantum mechanics, and they think they're world experts. People will, tell you, they'll explain things in abstract physics to you. I mean, give me a break. How many people really understand abstract physics? Very few. Very, very few. I mean, and yet people don't want to say, I don't know. And you see this across the board. There's a lot of stuff I don't know. A lot. Huge amounts of stuff that I don't know. And I know a lot. So I think it's non-objective, and people are not objective, and I think they have wrapped up their self-esteem in a notion that they must have answers to everybody's questions. And that is hugely self-destructive. Hugely self-destructive. You must wrap your self-esteem up in those values that you actually attain. And a real value that you can actually attain is knowledge, understanding. But if you have a false knowledge and false understanding, you will not gain from it self-esteem. Don't try to fake the self-esteem by pretending you know more than you know. All right, Richard says, the government cannot solve the homeless problem, but can change the Earth's temperature with enough carbon taxes. Yeah, right. Absolutely. The central planners are all-knowing and all-able, except when they're not all-knowing and not all-able, which happens to be pretty much always. All right, everybody. Thank you for the support. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you to all the super chatters. I will see you all tomorrow, same time, 2 p.m. East Coast time. And we'll talk about the news. I'll answer questions. And we'll talk about some yet to be determined positive topic. Bye, everybody. See you soon.